I'm Kier from In Defense Of, a podcast member of the GonnaGeek network, just like the one you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual. Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready, because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1...
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Hello and welcome to Better Podcasting. My name is Stephen John Drew, and with me today is Stargate Pioneer.
It's Better Podcasting Night! Woo!
That's a soundbite for somebody.
I bet. You know, chug, 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 chug. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not that kind of show. We're a show about the hobby podcaster trying to teach you tips and tricks on how to get better with your podcasting, because hobby podcasting might not be professional podcasting, but you're competing with them. So might as well sound as good as you can.
Absolutely. And this is episode 34, which today we will cover promotion.
Promote yourself. Like get a raise, like that type of promotion.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah. So hobby podcasters get paid nothing. So you get a promotion from nothing. So carry the 2 times by 3, whatever, multiply. Yep. Still 0.
Yeah, but here is the best part about promoting yourself is that you get to just subtly talk about all of the crazy and cool happenings that you've got, including happenings that are on the GonnaGeek network if you are part of the GonnaGeek network, because we are always looking for people to apply there. And if you are thinking that you want to be a part of the network, please go to GonnaGeek.com/join, and we would love to hear your application. There is a review process, and not all podcasts do get accepted to the network. We want to make sure you're the right fit for us, which is something that you gotta fit with your fellow podcasters, right?
That's right. It's like, you're doing a hypothermia drill. You're in the sleeping bag. You got no clothes on whatsoever. So you're laying there together, and you got to make sure you fit together so you're not bursting out of the sleeping bag, and you're actually saving your life because you are staying warm, which is something that Stephen knows all about because he is podcasting from his igloo in Canada.
Speaking of Canada, by the way, I do think that this is the first time that I've actually had a chance to use it. I've often complained about my crappy internet service, and I got to give credit where credit's due. I called a week ago approximately to my provider, and here's the thing. They actually did me a solid. They recognize how long I have been with them, and they, for free for a year, upgraded me to a higher package. Just a slight difference. But the thing is, with what I'm doing now with podcasting and stuff like that, every megabit per second counts, and I did really, really appreciate them doing that. So I know in the past I've made some jokes, but we're not sponsored by anybody, so I won't name drop or anything like that. But I do really appreciate them doing that, and it's always great if you are having problems to get them solved, and this helped solve one of my problems.
Yeah, and you mentioned every megabyte, actually, megabyte per second actually counts. I would counter and say every kilobyte actually counts for what we're doing, because you get up near that cap and it's like, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this or not. And, we get underneath the cap and we're able to do it. So that's all good. We're all good here. We're all fine now. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. That was really awkward, but let's go ahead and talk about our main point. Should we do that?
Oh, I'm all about the main point.
I'm also about introducing the segues to the other topic, which is what I just did, and I know that that's super jarring. So There you go. All right, we are wrapping up that distribution and promotion arc today, and we're talking about promotion. We're going to run by a bunch of different considerations you might have on how to promote your podcast, because now that you are distributing it and you have it here and you have it there, you want to know, how do I make it more likely that people find it? And we're going to tell you all about the to-dos and maybe the not so much great ideas, because there are several of those which we are going to recommend that you avoid. And I'll go ahead and give you the first recommendation. The first recommendation that I have for you is to just email Stargate at Pioneer at betterpodcasting.com every time you post an episode, because he will go and he will clamor. No, I'm just kidding. I'm making that up.
I might clamor it if I have time and if there's something interesting to clamor it. And that is actually one of the things. We'll just jump ahead here a second. So clamor is this great capability, which you could take 24 seconds of audio. Any audio, doesn't have to be a podcast. But if you do clamor your podcast, you can put your MP3 link in there so that when it is posted on Facebook, when it is posted on Twitter, when you post it on your website, whatever, people can actually click it and hear the rest of it. So yes, clamor is one of the ways that you can promote your podcast. Now, you can't just promote like every single 24 seconds the entire podcast. I guess you could, but I don't think that would work. But rather, you have to go in and you have to find the interesting things that are part of the episode that you would think that somebody else would find either funny, entertaining, informational, something like that. And it's only 24 seconds long. So you got to find clips that are 24 seconds long. And Stephen and I actually ran into an issue where even 24 seconds was too long for some applications. So we were talking about taking little bite clips out for the intro of the main GonnaGeek.com show. And 24 seconds is just too long to do that. So while 24 seconds is long, I do this quite a bit. I will listen to a podcast, any podcast that I listen to, it's free reign for clamoring. You can clamor your own podcast. You can clamor somebody else's podcast. It really doesn't matter. You just clamor them. And as long as you get credit where credit is due, it is just promotional. And I have not heard of an issue with clamor legally running into that, but it's 24 seconds and you're promoting whatever it is. So I usually find something funny and I throw it out there, and that is cool there. So clamor is one of the ways, but how do the clamors get out there? Like I said, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, you throw it up on social media. Now, we on Better Podcasting have several social media accounts. We have a Twitter account and a Facebook account. We don't really have anything more for Better Podcasting, but because there's just the two of us, we're kind of busy as it is, and we don't really need a whole swath of Instagram, Pinterest, and LinkedIn's, Google Pluses, Snapchats, or whatever that are specifically Better Podcasting. So you can have all of those, but just keep in mind that you're going to have to be active in all of those. Otherwise, they're just going to be sitting there as dead accounts, and nobody's going to want to look into it. Nobody's going to want to look into how it what else might be there. And they'll just move on to something else, because we've all run into dead accounts before that they don't have all the graphics up. They don't have all the information up. And you're like, yeah, these guys don't know what they're doing. I'll move on to the next thing. So just keep that in mind, that social media is good, but it comes at a cost. And I mentioned this at the C2E2 panel before. 3 social media accounts for any podcast is probably the tops, and it depends on how many people you have. I mean, if you have somebody that's dedicated to social media, you might be able to do more. But if you're just doing it collectively as an additional duty, so to speak, you're going to have to limit yourself in what you want. And then be where you're at. So don't create a new account on another new social media, because then you're going to have to go off and check it. So social media and clamoring are the first 2 promotional items that are kind of no does, but we just wanted to make sure that you got them.
Yeah, for sure. And with clamor, the thing that I will highly encourage you to do is, if you have other hosts that are on Facebook or Twitter, when somebody does clamor it, like it or share it, because it's all about that shareability, right? And that's where you're distributing your clamor to. It is being put out through Twitter or Facebook, and just really maximize that and do use your accounts and your movement that you've got to get that out there. Because maybe next thing you know, Jimmy's friend Timmy sees that, and then Timmy's a like or a listener. So absolutely maximize that clamor, and that kind of segues nicely into your Twitter and your Facebook. These are things that, if you do them right, you're gonna have the same effect, because you go out and you put a little tweet, a little nugget, a little enticing piece of information, and somebody happens to come across that. You put the right hashtag on there, and they click on it, and then maybe they're interested in it. I'll give you a hint here. Chris Farrell is really, really good. We've had him on the show before. He's a fellow GonnaGeek host, and he does a really good job of finding what I might borderline clickbait to get people interested in the subject, and it usually works. It pays off. You got to be a little careful with that, of course, because you don't want to be known as the person that is always teasing and enticing with false information, but he does it in a way that he chooses the terms relevantly to his said show, and he gets people to discover it. So I got to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, absolutely. So not only can you do clamors, but I've done this in a couple of the podcasts that I've done, is actually put 30-second promos in as an episode 0. So normally in episode 0, you put out there just to start the feed, just to make sure everything works and that sort of thing. And you kind of explaining what your podcast is, that sort of thing. Well, after you get going, after a while, you can either replace that file or supplement it with another file that you post dated earlier on in your RSS feed and actually do a commercial. I would recommend a 30-second commercial. I know a lot of people do 60-second commercial, 90-second commercial, whatever, and there are places for that. So if you have time to produce one, go ahead. But 30-second spot, if you only have time to do one, that should probably be where you're at. And then post it on your website, in your contact portion of your website, post it on your feed so that anybody can come by, they can pick it up, and they can use it on their own show, and you can do a promotion swap. So clamors, commercials, and social media are all ways that we can start out by doing promotion. Now, I did mention a website. A website's a great place to promote your stuff. It's a central hub, and it's where you can showcase everything. So it's your place to be your personal billboard, so to speak. So make sure that you have a central hub, no matter where it is. We talked about it before. I don't care if it's your Facebook page, if it's a Tumblr page, or if it's a web page. Make sure you have a central site that you can actually use to promote your podcast, your content.
Absolutely. And the thing that you want to be careful of when you do post it on your website is make sure you're doing the appropriate things for SEO, because you absolutely can use SEO as a promotion tool. You want to make sure it's properly tagged in a short, it's got short, concise descriptions that are applicable, so that when people are searching, the relevant information is being populated, and thus you end up hopefully attracting more of an audience. Make sure that you do that SEO properly. And also, you can sometimes expand a little bit when you do go into sort of a more in-depth look at a subject. What you can do is you can use that back and forth with your podcast as a promotion tool, in my opinion. So, like, let's say, for example, SP and I had 100 other different reference links for a topic here. We could go ahead and put those into our website and promote on this podcast, having you go to our website, betterpodcasting.com, and find all of these other links. Well, on the other hand, it can work reverse. If you have these links in there and this information on there, somebody might search for that, come across that, and then find your podcast. So in my opinion, they do really work hand in hand, and you can definitely use them to go more in depth into a certain subject.
Yep, establishes expertise, works for SEO, and then definitely goes more in depth, because as much as you talk in an hour or two or a half an hour or 20-minute show or whatever, it's not going to be as much information as you can cram in a blog post. So another thing that goes along, like the commercials that I was talking about and the clamors, is something that is great with like TV shows, especially like in the 80s and the 90s, when they had these immense like 26 episode long things and they're like, oh man, what are we going to do next week? And the writers are like, oh, I don't know. I was in this bender all last night. I just don't have any good ideas, whatever. Guess what they do? They put together a clip show. Now, I've actually done this on Voices of Defiance. I did a clip show for season 1 of the Defiance episodes that we did on Voices of Defiance, and I wanted to do a clip show for the other ones. I still might do that at some point in time. One of the most downloaded episodes that I had was that clip show, was literally just reused content from other shows that we did along the way. So you can use that as promotion too. You can promote that, like, here is an example of our great content, and you can throw this link wherever you can. You can reference it in interviews if you ever do that, or a media what do they call it? A promotion media press release. You can do one of those as well. I haven't heard of a lot of success with press releases with podcasts these days, just because there's so many podcasts out there, but it might work for you. So you can try that as well.
Absolutely. Just be careful. We'll talk more on clip shows on a future episode, because there's a right way to do it and there is a wrong way to do it. And if you're just grabbing a bunch of random stuff and putting it in there with no real thought on the production value, it can actually have the reverse effect. So be careful. They are a good tool, but you got to use them right.
That's right. So another thing that is used for promotion is an email list or an email bulletin. You can throw one of those out. I personally have not done one of these because personally, my email box is full enough. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. If they want to know more information, they can go to my website and they can see my stuff or whatever. But a lot of people use it. And a lot of people use it well. They use it to shoot out notifications that a show is out. They use it to shoot out the actual show notes of people, because most people are actually listening to the podcast on the phone. And while they can swipe over to the actual show notes or the ID3 tags basically that come with it, sometimes it's just not advantageous. So they can go back to their email later and go, oh, wow, I really wanted to do this. And they can click on the link and get it there. So email distribution is definitely one way that you can do it. Now, you can do it regular, like once a week. You can do it when every episode comes out. You can do it both ways, and you can do it with special announcements. Like if you're selling something, you can either throw out coupon codes, that sort of thing as well. But if you're just trying to promote your podcast, it's a different sort of way than trying to promote a good or service that you're trying to sell. So email lists and email bulletin, whatever you want to call it, is definitely another way that you can promote your podcast.
Absolutely. And there is another way that I've seen this done, and it's usually done in conjunction with a website, is basically a month recap, because, you know, you always hope that your audience is listening and checking it out every week, every minute that you, or the minute after you release it. But sometimes it happens that they get backlogged. And so if you do it as sort of a monthly recap, it can work really well, because you're not overwhelming them. You're not giving them weekly emails. And sometimes people do start to ignore them because they're like, oh, I get so many of these. If you do it as a monthly sort of thing, as a, hey, this is what we had in the month, it really kind of helps put everything into a nice little package that somebody might go, oh, I missed episode 14. Let me go download it now.
Yeah, it can work out great for you. Another thing that we found out that works out great for promoting podcasts is our network, GonnaGeek.com or GonnaGeekNetwork.com, whatever you want to call it. So you don't have to be part of GonnaGeek. You could be part of a network, and it is great to use as cross promotion. It's a great extra distribution point, as we already mentioned. And you can do cross reads of promotions. You can exchange hosts. So when you go on another podcast, you can say, hey, look, I'm from Better Podcasting, or I'm from GonnaGeek. And they can go, hey, I'm from the whatever Star Wars podcast or whatever. And by the way, if you're running a Star Wars podcast and you're listening to this, GonnaGeek.com/join. We really want a Star Wars podcast on the network. So it's great. And generally it's similar sort of shows. So you can share SEO, and then you build that mountain in Google, and then they focus on your content, which is part of the network, which works out well for everybody. It's what we do on GonnaGeek.
Absolutely. Really, really have some good advantages to doing that. And we've talked about it, I think, enough in the last couple episodes, but definitely a great way to promote. Another thing that sometimes will help you get promoted, and not always the easiest, but is to be featured in certain areas such as iTunes. They have a What's Hot area and a new and noteworthy. I can't believe I just said new and noteworthy. I want to go throw up, but it is something where, yes, these areas can sometimes help you get promoted. Spreaker has a featured area, so does Stitcher and Spotify. So all of these featured areas, if you are on them, are definitely a way that you're probably going to see a couple of extra hits. I know many podcasters who have determined that they have been on new and noteworthy. Oh God, again, I said it, because they did see a change in their traffic. So those things are areas that you can be on. And I want to give my standard disclaimer here. The reason why I'm making my jokes about wanting to throw up saying new and noteworthy is because some people put too much effort into it, and it is really not all that it's cracked up to be anymore. And I'm just going to flat out go and say it. That's my opinion on it.
Was somewhere between 1,200, and I heard a stat today that I was listening to a podcasters roundtable. Somebody threw out 5,000 new podcasts every week. So it's somewhere in there between 1,200 and 5,000 new podcasts every week. You're just not, you got to stand out in the crowd. So a What's Hot section is great, but nobody's like going through new and noteworthy and looking for a new podcast. If you actually use new and noteworthy to find a new podcast and you're listening to this, please drop me a line, stargatePioneer@GonnaGeek.com, or look at my contact information on the YouTube, BetterPod, @BetterPod on Twitter, Better Podcasting on Facebook, whatever. Just get a hold of us because we would like to know what your experiences are.
Yeah.
Generally, when I'm looking for a new podcast and it's not a recommendation for somebody else, which is the large majority of new podcasts that I actually pick up, I search for it in Google. That's how I find podcasts.
Yeah.
And so you want your Google SEO to be good. And if you use new or noteworthy for that, so, good on you. Let us know your success in that, and we'll move on. I do want to mention a collaborative effort special event, such as International Podcast Day, which has been September 30th, the last couple of years in 2015 and 2014. Haven't heard too much announcements on it for 2016. Assume it's going to be the same. So special events like that, if you can participate that and cross promote between all the different podcasters that are a part of it, you're probably going to be, you're picking up people that are already listening to podcasts, but they're at least knowing your show exists. So whether or not they decide to add you to their 5 or 6 weekly podcast shows that they listen to, I don't know. That's up to you and them, whether your content's good enough and whether they have enough time to listen to it. But it is a way to promote your podcast.
For sure. Another thing that will cost you usually a bit of money, but a lot of people have success with this, is developing an app for your podcast. If you have an Android app or an Apple app, they can make a difference in discoverability, and that is something that you could definitely go ahead and pay somebody to do that. The other thing that you could pay for, and this requires a little bit of engagement with yourself, you're going to be looking at business cards or other promotional materials, and that is something that if you were to do those, they can absolutely help bring people in. But again, you're going to do a little bit of legwork on that, even if it's a business card. But the reason why I personally recommend that people do have business cards is because you never know the scenario that you're going to suddenly find yourself in, and it might be relevant. And just good to have on hand, because usually, unless you're going to pay quite a bit of money, you're looking at a few week turnaround for business cards. So it's good just to have them on hand so that if all of a sudden an event comes up in a week from now, you're good to go and you can start dishing that out so that people do have a quick reference. And the promotional materials, we talked about it before, something like a coffee mug. If you are cool with sharing your podcast with your workmates and things like that, some people aren't, then just start casually drinking out of your Better Podcasting mug, and then they'll find it, right?
Yeah, that's right. So just to go back to the business cards, there's 2 main uses that I've actually had with business cards. One is actually in an event that you're speaking or whatever, and you're in a room with people that are actually interested. So you literally hand them out like a deck of cards. You're playing poker or whatever with all of them. So you're handing one out to everybody. So that's one example. The other example I'll give you, I was in a class a couple of weeks ago with a guy that was a big comic book fan. I was like feeling him out for a while, and finally I was like, yeah, I do a comic book podcast. I whipped out a card, gave it to him, and he took it and was like, oh, cool, I'll check this out. I've heard of these before, these podcasts on comic book comic books in general, but I haven't actually listened to one. I'll listen to yours. So that was pretty cool. And I was going to touch base with him today and I forgot. So I'm going to have to do that again. But in any event, those are like the two ways. So either have a whole stack of them in your bag if you're going to an event, or carry just a couple of them in your purse, in your wallet, in your satchel, in your computer bag, whatever, for those special occasions where you run into the one or two people that might be interested. And you just get talking about whatever subject that you're into. Doesn't have to be comic books, although I don't know why you wouldn't be interested in comic books. So you could go ahead and get great stuff from that. All right. So that is kind of what I've listed as like the quote unquote conventional ways to promote. They're like the standard ones that we've all thought through and they're all just natural to us or whatever. Let's talk about some of the indirect or the unconventional promotion opportunities. And first of all, in all these situations, make sure that you're actually providing value. You're not using them saying, hey, I've got a podcast and it's about this. No. You're trying to say, hey, look, I know a lot about this topic, or I talk about this topic from time to time, week to week, whatever, and I know a few things about it. So you can go into different forums or groups or Reddit areas, whatever, and you can talk about your expertise, talk about your area, give your opinions or whatever, but don't say, hey, look, I got a podcast, because they're going to be like, who is this guy? I don't want to hear him. And if you're listening to this podcast, you are interested in podcasting, and I want to point this out. I am involved in a lot of podcasting groups, like Podcast About Podcasting groups on Facebook, on Google Plus, and that sort of thing. I go into them and I see like 3, 4, 5, 10, 12 posts a day of, hey, look, I got my new episode out. Here it is. I don't want to know your episode. No. I'm sorry, I don't. I want to know what you're doing to podcasts and what you're doing to improve your podcast. That's what I'm here for. If somebody needs help, I'll give you help, but I don't want to see, hey, look, I got an episode. So that's just an example of just doing the wrong thing. Don't slap your podcast everywhere. Just make sure you're giving value. So that's the precipice for this. So there are different ways to do this. First of all, guesting on other shows. Now, this is just fun for me. I like podcasting. So if you want to podcast with me, look me up. Stargate Pioneer at GonnaGeek.com. Catch me on Twitter at Stargate Pioneer. I will most likely say yes to be on your show. And because I like doing it a lot, not just because I want to be on your show. I like podcasting. And if I don't have to edit the podcast, if I don't have to prepare for the podcast, if I don't have to edit and publish it, whatever, later, I'm good with just hanging out. And that's podcasting for me. So guesting on other shows is a way. And then they normally ask, hey, where can we find you? Well, you can find me at GonnaGeek.com or whatever your tagline is. So that's one way. Another thing that we've done recently is we actually did a convention panel on podcasting. Now, you don't have to do it on podcasting. You could do it in whatever niche you're at. And it doesn't have to be at a Comic-Con. It could be at whatever trade show you're doing, like outdoor stuff. You know, if I go to the outdoor show, normally like what is it called, Bass Pro Shops or Gander Mountain or Cabela's, normally they will come in and they will have a panel on how to fish or how to hunt or what's the best gear to use in this hunting season, whatever. So that's just an example. It doesn't have to be Comic Cons. It doesn't have to be about podcasting. It could be about what you are doing in your niche, but you have to go to places that are about that. So convention panels are great. And you can say, oh, by the way, I'm Stargate Pioneer from GonnaGeek.com at the end.
And I want to give a great example of somebody, a listener that probably has had this happen. And if you've told us about it, I apologize for not remembering if that is the case. But Diami Beloki does woodworking and a woodworking podcast. That would be a phenomenal thing. There might be a woodworking trade show or something where Diami could be a speaker. And then, oh, there's the subtle podcast plug. So it would be a great connection between the two. And it's not necessarily you're going to speak about podcasting. It's probably better, in my opinion, if you're actually going and speaking about your subject, because then you can go and you can turn it around and you can spin it. So here's my advice, A, B, C, and D. And if you want to keep up with my advice, F, G, and H, check out my podcast at podcastabcdefg.co.uk.rst.
Don't know. I know what RS is. I don't know what RST is. I'm going to have to look that up. But yeah, speaking engagements are great. It doesn't have to be anything that we've talked about before. It could be a Rotary Club. It could be a Boy Scout meeting or a Girl Scout meeting. It could be a church occasion, just whatever, a town hall meeting. It doesn't matter, where they're looking at an expert speaker. Any of those are great opportunities to speak. Or if you want to translate your talents into being like an MC, if you want to MC a wedding, or if you want to MC a, I don't know, 13-year-old's birthday party or something like that, you can use your same podcast gear to do that. Now, you're going to have to do a little bit different things with music or something like that, but it is possible for you to do, and you might actually make money at it as well. But the speaking stuff should generally be in your expertise. And if you're a lawyer, a real estate lawyer, and you're speaking at a Rotary Club, you might want to give, okay, this is the real estate realities in our town today or whatever. Oh, by the way, I do a podcast, and you can catch all the great advice about how to buy a new subway station not subway station, subway restaurant franchise through my podcast or whatever. You can actually do that sort of stuff. And I know Rotary Clubs are great. They're always looking for speakers for Rotary Clubs. So if you have something of value to say that's akin to your podcast, you can promote subtly at the end, your podcast at the end, or part of your presentation or whatever. Like, one of the great things I do is, like at the beginning when you're telling about yourself, one of the great things I do is this podcast. But well, let's talk about this stuff so you don't focus on it. Or if they want to talk about podcasting, you can do that too. There's this guy who runs a vet podcast, and he actually did a podcast day on his Air Force base that he works at recently. I thought that was great that he was part of that as well, because podcasting with military families is actually very important. It allows them to connect to whatever activity they're doing. And quite frankly, if you do a local podcast, they're connecting to home as well. So that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Another thing that you can do is run a campaign. Now, this is something that you may not get the traction that you need if you don't have an audience yet. But like, let's say you all of a sudden were like, I'm doing a podcast with 4 different guys, and we're all using Behringer basic XM 1800S microphones, and we want to do a major gear upgrade. Well, if you've got an audience now, what you can do is put together a campaign through like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatever. I think there's GoFundMe or Patreon. And what you can do is put together this campaign for a purpose. And while you are hoping indeed to get your target, which is to upgrade your gear or whatever it was, you're also using it as promotion, because all of a sudden you're depending on your audience to not only donate, but also tell other people about your campaign, because that's what you're banking on for the success of your campaign. And so that is going to end up being more awareness to other people. And maybe, again, you might get some new people in there. So absolutely, campaigns can help. Other thing, and this is something that I say, do this from the right place if you're doing it. Do not do it from a promotion perspective. If you are, maybe you have an opportunity to help out a good cause, and also at the same time, like, I guess help out a good cause on behalf of you and your fellow podcasters, because I'll give you an example of that. There is a former podcast host or co-host of mine, Steve Boyd, and he works for a company that every year does a children's charity fundraiser, and it is out of the goodness of their heart. There's actually a phenomenal story on that. If you want to look it up, you can find the story on that. I won't share that now, but a really, really good story with that. And it's a really great way that he's able to help another charity. And at the end of it, what company is on there? The company that he works for. So it is something that it's mutually beneficial. But like I say, if you're going to do that out of the right place, and don't do it out of any slimy reason.
Right. The promotion part is just an after effect of, hey, we did this and we fully support it or whatever. I think every business should have some sort of charity focus to them. And I know if you're a hobby podcaster, you're not a business, but if you can give back to the community at any point in time, that is going to benefit you personally and your podcast. So that's just a heads up. And I completely agree with Stephen. Don't go into it like, oh, this will be great for my podcast. No. Use your podcast as a tool to use it as promotion for the charity itself. And then there's some kickback that comes back from that. You giving your take in the world. What comes around goes around, that sort of thing. So that pretty much wraps up what are the indirect promotion opportunities. Now we're going to get into a place that is, quite frankly, a next level up, because we're going to talk about spending some money. Yes, you can spend your money and promote your podcast just like any other thing in the world today. So you can spend money, and a lot of people immediately think of Facebook. Oh, I can boost a page or boost a post on Facebook. Yeah, no, I don't recommend that at all. So if you're new to Facebook campaigns, I would recommend that you read up on them and you get some information before you go forward with it. But it is a way that you can go forward. And there is a lot of free advice out there that you can gather up before you go into it. So if you're trying to be money conscious and still spend some money to promote your podcast on Facebook, you can do that. So that's like, I just want to get that one out of the way to begin with, because that's the easiest, but that's also in conjunction with social media to begin with. So it's one and the same to me. I know it's different, but to me, it's one and the same. Now, there are other ways you can do it. Like I said before, you can put a promotion, a 30-second commercial together, right? Well, you got that 30-second commercial. You can actually go through mid-roll, which is now EW Scripts or Podtract, or make your own negotiations with networks or podcasts and actually place your ad in their podcast and pay them to do that. That is something that you could do. Now, if it's not just out of the goodness of your heart, like podcasting has been for the past decade or so, you can do it through money. So it's definitely one way to do it.
Absolutely. Which takes us perfectly for a brief pause here, because I do want to mention that this episode is indeed sponsored by Stargate Pioneer's white t-shirt. You can check out all of his white t-shirts at stargatepioneer.com.
That's right. You can. So that is a great way to actually work in a promo read into your episode. And quite frankly, we have promo reads that we do on the GonnaGeek network, but I find the more effective ones is when you actually tie in something that you're already talking about and say, oh, you can go over and do that. And I actually won an award for that on the GonnaGeek.com show. So I'm like, yes, I know how to do this. So that's pretty good. Another person that does that really well is Wing, by the way. So you can catch him at Legends Podcast, which is also on GonnaGeek Network. So he does a phenomenal job on that. If you're looking for an example, just listen to Wing for a while and he will just roll right in. So along the lines of other podcasts that you can throw your ads on, you can do radio ads. You can do Google ads. You can actually buy a billboard. Yep. You can. If you're doing a podcast about trucking, you buy a billboard somewhere on like I-70, I-5, I-95, whatever, where a lot of trucks are going to be going back and forth, and you're automatically going to start to get truckers involved because they're on the road. And they've got nothing better to do. So except for talk to each other, look at the scenery, curse other drivers, and listen to something. So you might as well give them a podcast to listen to. And I know there's trucking podcasts out there. So that is something you could do. You might think it's more expensive than it really is. So just check in on it. It might actually be within your budget. You never know. So there's billboards. And then also, this is something that's really neat. I've been to Vegas. I've seen this. I've been to other cities that have it. They have these trucks with flatbed trucks with these signs on it that like rotate through, or they're electronic now too. And so they run through rush hour traffic. So if you've got a nice podcast that they might be stuck somewhere and don't want to listen to the radio anymore, like about a gazillion of us out there, they can say, oh, I can listen to that podcast. So that's a way to do it as well. There is... businesses, you know how businesses have a little area cork boards that they can throw other businesses on there that they support or support them or something like that. You can negotiate a spot there. And by the way, that is a negotiation. Just don't pin your stuff up there unless that's part of the deal for that particular business or restaurant or bar or whatever. I would talk to the owner. I would find out a proper way to do that. And then truck stops, restaurants, whatever, they have those advertisements over the urinal. I mean, that's a great spot because, I mean, you're stuck there for however long you're actually relieving yourself. So you might as well get some great advertisements there. So that's a way to do it.
There's another one that's kind of along those lines that I just want to interject here for a minute. And only some cities have this, but it's a lot of places have a certain condensed newsletter sort of thing at various fast food chains. Some are like called Coffee News or called Restaurant Reader and things like that. There's a bunch of different names, and some places have them. They're usually just short. They have like a little quiz on it or a little fun facts. A lot of them are sponsored by different businesses for a fairly affordable price because they're a fairly simple publication. I've actually known some people who have done that with podcasts locally and have had good traction with that because it's sort of the same principle. Somebody's sitting there eating their French fries and they're going to be there eating their French fries for another 30 seconds and they're all alone in the corner of the fast food restaurant crying because they just got stood up on their date and they're weeping into the coffee reader and, oh, look, there's your podcast. So there you go. It's actually, honestly, I have known people who have had good success with that.
Yeah, a little bit of personal experience with that, maybe, Stephen? Crying into your French fries? I think so, yeah. Well, we'll all give you a big hug afterwards. How about that?
Okay.
In the meantime, we talked about charitable events before. That is a separate thing. I just want to mention that to draw a line between them. You can actually sponsor real events. If you have a festival going on in town, which actually is a monetary thing, it's not necessarily a charity, although some are. You can sponsor a race. You can sponsor a NASCAR. Yes, you can do all those things. So special events you can actually sponsor. So just keep that in mind as different things actually happen. You can sponsor a new building, paver brick in the organization that's putting in a new park or something like that. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can actually sponsor, and you can even sponsor like a part of an awards, like some youth sporting organization. You can sponsor them. It doesn't matter. I mean, you have to look at the return on investment. So if you've got a worldwide podcast and you've got your podcast name on the back of your youth squirt hockey team jerseys, probably not the reach that you're looking for. Yeah. But it is different things that you can do and give back. And if you're going to sponsor it, like you don't have a business, you actually work for somebody else, yet you have kids and you have to sell sponsorships and you're like, well, I could just sponsor my podcast. So you could do that as well. And we already talked about running ads. I just want to point this out specifically. You can run ads in comic books. That is possible to do. And we talked about it before, but merchandise, we didn't talk about car stickers. You can actually do a car wrap. Now, again, you're talking local reach, but you could do a car wrap. And especially if you're a traveling salesman, that'd be awesome because you're going all over the country with this car with these podcast things on. It just makes you seem bigger than you really are. And they're not that expensive, which is amazing. They're a couple $100 depending on how big your car is. Now, you have a big truck, it's going to be more. But if you can afford the big truck, you might be able to afford that big wrap. So that's just different things that you can't do. So we talked a lot about what you can do. We're going to caution you now. There's some things that you just can't do.
Yeah, number one, I'm going to start with the obvious thing, something that we've briefly touched on before, and a lot of other podcasts about podcasting have talked about. Don't Twitter bomb. Twitter bombing is when you go and essentially spam Twitter with direct links to your podcast because it artificially inflates your stats, causes other problems, which skews the industry. There's a whole bunch of negative side effects from Twitter bombing. And personally, if I see somebody Twitter bombing, I will unfollow them and will not listen to their podcast because I think that it is extremely annoying and very detrimental to the podcasting world. So don't Twitter bomb. If you are going to tweet, like we've talked about, do it reasonably. Put out maybe one a day for your first few days that you're releasing. That's okay. Maybe you're doing a live event. Do a couple of promotions through the day of, whatever. But don't take your direct link to your podcast and tweet it over and over and over and over. It is just really, really a bad idea. The other thing is, don't spam your feed, whatever your feed is. Is it Facebook? Is it Google Plus? Is it any of these other places? Don't spam your feed because, again, it might have the reverse effect where all of a sudden people are going to go, yeah, I don't feel like seeing 6 tweets about your paint trying podcasts every hour, I'm just going to unfollow you altogether. And there you go. You've completely undone everything that you've set out to do. The other thing that I'm going to... Actually, I'll turn it over to you, SB, to say this one, because this one here is one that I actually, honestly, I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I think you do a very good job of waiting for the right opportunity in this regard when you do guest on other shows.
Yeah, so when I do guest on other shows, and I have from time to time guests on other shows, there's always this thought of, I need to get this in about my show. I need to get that in about our network. I need to get that in. But you know what? I'm there for one reason, one main reason, and that is to be a guest talking the subject that they want me to talk about. And then I make sure I take care of that, because that is what their audience is going to remember me. Oh, this guy was great. He knew this and this and this about the subject that I care about why I'm listening to the podcast. Or this guy was so funny. Like I was on an episode of Podcasters Roundtable about RSS feeds. I know I've talked about it before. It was dull, the dullest podcast topic you could possibly be a part of. And to add on to that, all I had to say is I had 2 RSS feeds for my show. I had a live one with Spreaker and I had the Ellipson one, and that was it. And I'm on this hour-long podcast. So, what am I going to do to bring value to this podcast? So I brought a little humor to it. A lot of humor to it, actually, at the end. So that was cool. So it's little things like that you try to find a way to be of value to the podcast you're on. And then they're going to want to know, hey, I want to catch this guy out at GonnaGeek.com, or I want to catch this guy's comic book show out, or I want to catch this guy's podcasting show out. That is the stuff you need to do. You don't bring it at the beginning, maybe to establish credibility at the beginning, but you don't spend an hour talking about your podcast on somebody else's podcast. Don't do it. It's not going to be good. Just make sure you slip in a way to contact you or check you out at the end, and maybe to establish credibility at the beginning. Other than that, leave it alone.
Yeah, because to me, there's nothing more annoying than a listener hearing, all right, and now here's Steven John Drew, our special guest today. Yep, it's me, Steven, and I have a podcast on GonnaGeek.com, BetterPodcasting.com, and we talk about geeky stuff on GonnaGeek, and on Better Podcasting, we tell you all about how to be a hobby podcaster, and we just released the latest episode where we talked about promotion, which you should definitely check out at BetterPodcasting.com/ so annoying. No, wait for it to be natural and naturally inject it if you're allowed to do so. A lot of podcasters are willing to scratch each other's back. And so look for the clues. If they say to you, why don't you take a moment to tell our audience a little bit about yourself? There's your ticket to promote yourself. That's what they're implying. Don't just do it unsolicited and over the top. It is really, really annoying. On the flip side of that, what I will say, we briefly have touched on it before, is mic flags. If you're on a video show, they are a great way to subtly promote your podcast without being too distracting. So I encourage you, if you are doing any video shows, get yourself a mic flag, because even if you don't get a chance to audibly promote it, at least the video viewer will see your logo there.
That's right. And you don't have to depend on somebody else's lower third or contact bar information like we flash on our shows. And Steven does a great job of doing that, not only for us, but for the guests as well that come on our show. So if you're on a good podcast that is good produced and they actually look into stuff like that, you know, maybe there's that, but you don't always know that. Not everybody has your same technical expertise. You could be going up or down in technology when you go to somebody else's podcast. So just keep that in mind. So I hope that you have enjoyed our look into the distribution arc and promotion. This is the end of the 3-part arc. If you have any questions, go ahead and get a hold of us. And we look forward to interacting with you on this subject, because obviously we had a lot to say because we had 3 whole episodes on it. Now, Steven, what do we got in store for the listener next time?
Next time, we're going to talk a little bit about... Oh, am I going to tease that? Should I say? No,
I think
we'll talk about it at the end of the show.
All right.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
Today in the download, we are going to be talking about the podcast movement, which is something that SP and I did want to briefly talk about, because it's something that has been happening for the last couple of years. And honestly, a lot of interesting announcements have come out of it. SP nor I will be able to attend. There are a variety of reasons why we can't attend, but if past history does repeat, it's going to be an exciting change or set of announcements or movement in the podcast industry.
Yeah, so Podcast Movement has now established itself as the premier podcast conference in the industry. So anything dealing with podcasting, everybody's flocking to this one conference. Now, if you're podcasting about podcasting like we are, and Better Podcasting is a great place to go. But if you are podcasting about boats, you want to go to a boat show. You want to go where the action is. And if you want to learn more about podcasting, Podcast Movement is a great place to go. The thing that I wanted to really touch on here is I've been getting indications through the industry that that Podcast Movement is going to be used this year to unload on a lot of new software, a lot of new announcements on different industries that support the podcast industry. So keep your ear to the ground. This will be the weekend after the 4th of July, or I guess the 1st of July, as you crazy Canadians do. I don't know, whatever. It's the same weekend. So it's the next weekend, I believe, like the 7th through the 10th of July. Basically, the conference will be in Chicago. Tickets are almost sold out if they aren't sold out already. So just, if you're not going, pay attention to the news in the next couple of weeks. There's going to be some exciting announcements across the board. We've already heard some announcements that come out already in preparation for this, but there are some companies that are still got their developers locked to their keyboards, locked to their computers, trying to get some amazing new stuff out. This is the year where I think a convention like Podcast Movement is going to be instrumental to changing fundamentally some of the niches of the podcast industry. So stay tuned for announcements on that. I just wanted to call that out. We could go into half or a couple of dozen of pre-announcements that we've already heard, but I want to wait until the big stories come out after Podcast Movement and start marching down them. So just check that out if you haven't already. Check out even the schedule, the agenda at Podcast Movement, and you'll see what's going on there. Unfortunately, I can't go. I'll kind of be in the area, but I can't go because I'm going to be on vacation. So it was just an incredible bad timing, great place for me, but incredible bad timing for me this year. I have heard that they're going to change both time and location from year to year. Like last year, it was August in Dallas. This year, it is July in Chicago. No idea where they'll be next, but stay tuned for where they're going to be next year. If you're not going this year, it's going to be a fun time. And then if you're in the podcasting industry like we are with Better Podcasting, then it's in your niche. So you should plan on going at some point in time.
Absolutely. And definitely keep your eyes on facebook.com/betterpodcasting, because I'm sure we'll be getting some links that we'll be posting on there. I know there's been a lot of rumblings about different podcast related companies making some changes, working on big projects leading up to this. So I think that it's going to be a very interesting weekend that does come out of this.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into the feedback. All right. Better Podback this week. We wanted to touch base and follow up on something that we got a while ago from Knox Richardson. And SP, you did a really, really good job of extracting data. So let me turn it over to you on this one.
So way back in podcast number 27 of Better Podcasting, Knox Richardson had asked some questions on Facebook, and we talked about it. And we asked, what topics would you like to see us cover in future episode? Well, guess what, Knox? We might have not answered you directly, but whether or not you really realized it, we have been answering your questions. So let's just go down one by one here. You might be astounded as to what you hear here. So the first thing that he asked for was how to get better sound quality from your guest. Double Ender, Zencaster, Google Hangouts on Air, .im? Well, let me tell you, on episodes number 29 through 31, we talked about levels, we talked about microphones, we talked about specialty microphones. Now, we didn't actually answer the recording specifically, but microphones are the key to getting better sound from your guests and to know what they have and to know how to use them best. So we did go through that in those three. And then I just want to point out, recently on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., Lauren had Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. part of the Comic Palooza podcast partnership program. She gained some phenomenal interviews. 3 of those interviews were via phone, literally phone, no Skype interviews at all. Phone was all you got. So given that, you just have to do the best that you can if you want to go listen to them to hear how they turned out, about how I did it. It's Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. number 126 through 129, the interviews were, and you can hear how live interviews via the phone or in person actually turned out, and you can see there. Now, question number 2 you asked, Knox, you said, how to engage with your podcast audience? Well, first of all, I have to ask you, why do you want to propose to your audience?
Yeah, I don't get that. Like, don't you...
I mean, isn't
it like a romantic thing? You got to build up to it, and
there's legalities involved. You can only have one legal spouse in the United States right now. I mean, that's it, right? No.
Okay, that joke's played. Let's move on.
No, seriously, live streaming is a way to engage with your audience. We've got Suncast in the chat right now. He's been interact with us. We've had people pop in over on Facebook Live. So there are ways to engage with your audience live, and you give them contact information, that sort of stuff. But we just seriously talked about the live distribution on episode 31 or 32 of Better Podcasting. So we kind of covered that. There's still more to cover, but we kind of covered that. Now, question number 3, you asked, how do I grow my podcast? Well, that kind of starts with promoting your podcast, right? Which would be this episode.
On the video side of things, I'm pointing backwards because I'm saying jump back in your podcast if you're still asking that question, because you just missed it. We just literally did 45 minutes of it. So definitely covered that here. And thank you for that question there. And also the other thing that SP, I totally forgot about, again, give SP credit where credit is due. He pointed out that in episode 30, we did talk about Blueberry podcast stats and how Android is basically the biggest growth area right now. So definitely a consideration on growing your podcast is Android. And I just love to say that because I love my Android phone.
That's right. So as you heard before, getting an app on the Android side of things might serve you well to promote your podcast in one of the biggest growth areas in podcasts right now. So go check that out. The stats we talked about on episode 30, or you can check out the Blueberry or Raw Voice Media article as well. So question number 4, Knox asks, how to get more reviews and how do you deal with negative reviews? Well, guess what? We talked about negative reviews, didn't we, Stephen? That was on episode 32, where we had the negative feedback on episode 15, and we were able to joke around about that. That's great as well. I actually just dealt with a negative poster on Twitter today, and I just stayed calm. I said the facts. I wanted to react. I wanted to lay into this guy or bot or whatever it was, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to be above this, and I'm just going to stick to my ground, and I'm going to say what the facts are. So that is just different things that we talked about way back on episode 32, which was last week. So question number 5, he asked, does the hobby podcaster need an email list? All right, a couple things here. First of all, back on episode 28, we attempted to define a hobby podcaster. So that was kind of step 1. Like, does a hobby podcaster need an email list? Okay, what's a hobby podcaster? So we kind of took care of that. And then we talked about the promotional opportunities that are available through having an email distribution list. Do you have to have one? That's really up to you. And we'll probably talk more about that in the future. But those were 5 questions that you asked, and that was 6 episodes ago. And guess what? We kind of covered the information in the past 6 episodes. I just thought that was really neat. And Knox, thank you very much again for asking those questions. We hope you have been hearing your answers. And if you have more questions about the answers that we've given, you know how to get a hold of us. And we would really appreciate hearing from not only you, but from anybody else that has anything to say to Better Podcasting.
And I got to set it straight here, be honest. When I asked the question originally on Facebook, totally had every anticipation of doing what we did, which was taking the suggestions and making sure to integrate them in future episodes. I had zero expectation to take your question and answer them line by line, because that was what we wanted to do, was make sure as we did continue in our arcs, we did cover questions and things that people were curious on and make sure we fit them in as appropriate. So again, if you ever have suggestions on things you want to hear, please do get in touch with us. It's betterpodcasting.com. Email us podcast@betterpodcasting.com, or just get in touch with us any of the other ways, because while we may not have an answer for you right away, it might work out just like this, where we will make sure to integrate it into a future episode. And before we do close up here, I will just quickly summarize the happenings at geeks.live, that as we do record this live on Friday, June 24th. Suncast was in the chat tonight, and he did point out something during promotion that I think is a really great recap. Is he says, I think what you guys are getting at is to think of your podcast as a brand, not just a podcast. Absolutely, because there will be a variety of ideas that will come to you if you think of it that way. And also, my favorite piece of feedback of the night, which is if they have a chat headset, don't even let them on. That's my biggest pet peeve.
Sometimes you just got to roll with it. And yes, I did want to talk about branding specifically later, that it will be an arc in the future, at least an individual podcast. But we wanted to make sure that we covered promotion in this podcast, because that kind of answered the issue of how to grow your audience. Well, that's promotion, right? You need to promote your podcast in order to grow. So that is that. So thank you very much, Suncast, for those insightful comments. We really appreciate having you around in the chat.
For sure. But there you go. That is taking us to the end of Better Podcasting. So let's go ahead and quickly promote here the next arc that we are going to have. Well, it's a single episode. It's not an arc. We're going to talk about specialty episodes. Woo!
Yay! Maybe we'll win an award for it.
For episode 34 of Better Podcasting, I'm Stephen Jondrew, wishing you successful promotion.
And I'm Stargate Pioneer, and you can find me at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Bye!
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a GonnaGeek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.